Amidst China's increasing aggression in the South China Sea, Japan and Philippines have now signed a reciprocal access agreement, which allows the two nations to deploy their forces on each other's soil. Philippine Defense Minister Gilberto Teodoro and Japanese Foreign Minister Yoko Kamikawa have signed the deal during a ceremony in Manila, which was witnessed by Philippines President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. This agreement creates a framework to facilitate military cooperation, such as making the entry of foreign personnel and equipment easier for the visiting force. It also allows the two nations to share intelligence and conduct joint exercises to enhance military capabilities. Meanwhile, this deal is the first of its kind to be signed by Japan in Asia and is being seen as a significant move to counter China's growing military aggression in the South China Sea. Well, the question that arises now is, how is this deal going to regulate China's actions in the waters? Well, joining us at this point is Roger Liu, Senior Fellow, Flame University. Also with us is Mahesh Sachdev, former diplomat. Also with us is Robinder Sachdev, Foreign Affairs Analyst. Commodore Anil Jay Singh, Vice President, Indian Maritime Foundation, is also joining us live. Roger Liu, let me begin with you first. What do you make of this big step taken between Philippines and Japan? What are going to be the ramifications of this deal?
Well, I think this shows the seriousness of the situation in this area. Of course, we can look at this issue at least two levels. The first aspect is that the US-led alliances in the Indo-Pacific region has viewed China's threat as a serious matter. So they coordinated other allies like Japan to cover the areas in the Southeastern Asian part. So this reflects in the fact that Japan and the Philippines signed RAA or reciprocal access agreements today. That's the first thing. But the second thing that to look at is that I think the U.S. Armed Forces has been serious about what will happen in Taiwan. Because, well, at least for the last year, in the last year, 2023, the U.S. has asked the Philippines to open up 4 military bases in different parts of the Philippines to be used in the case of war to support Taiwan. And well, when it comes to the war of Taiwan or the possible conflict or the invasion from China to Taiwan, people always think about Japan. People always think about the US-Japan alliances and how US is going to use its variety of bases, military bases in different parts of Japan. But everybody forgets how important the geography of the Philippines is. The Philippines is just like 400 kilometers away from Taiwan or even less, and it controls the Bashi Channel between Taiwan and the Philippines. And when the US needs the military base to use, the Philippines actually is the most important neighboring countries to Taiwan other than Japan. So I think this at least reflects of two levels of what's happening here. And in the future, I think we will see more and more agreements to be signed between the Philippines and other countries.
Yes, what do you make of the contours of this pact, Mahesh Sachdev, which has finally been stitched and announced officially by the two countries?
Well, I think that it, well, that actually reflects...
that question was for Ambassador Sachdev.
Thank you. It's quite a significant development, first of its kind, and it overcomes the history of Japanese occupation during the Second World War of Philippines, when few of the most bitter battles between U.S. Armed Forces and Japanese Armed Forces were fought, creating a lasting bitterness. And now we see China being successful in making Philippines overcome that bitterness and get into such an agreement with Japan, and vice versa, Japan for the first time signing such an agreement with a Southeast Asian country. This is highly significant. It also shows that the new Philippines president Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is of a different caliber and orientation as compared to his predecessor, who began his term by mollycoddling to Beijing. I think there is also something to be said about the United States policy of pivot Asia and AUKUS that have been put in place. And the United States is now trying to ramp up and collectivize the Southeast Asian countries in defense agreements of this kind, so that it becomes one of the more equals among a group of countries that confront China. Now, much of the importance of this pact would lie in its economic contents. Japan has been a big provider of economic relief to Philippines, and this agreement would perhaps facilitate greater Japanese ingress into Philippines' economy. Philippines has been quite dependent on foreign aid and foreign investment, particularly in software areas. And this would be something that they would look forward to. On the other hand, China has got away so far by claiming nine-dash line without having any economic consequences. It has created a self-styled 1.9 million square kilometer area of the sea carved out for itself. It has no justification, and it has managed to rile up a number of Southeast Asian countries without paying any economic consequences. They are helpless in seeing China implement this expansionist policy at the sea without being able to take any economic riposte vis-a-vis Chinese ingress into their economies through BRI and other initiatives. And eventually, I think, is the economy more than the ground or sea-based confrontation, which would make China relent, as its own economy faces plenty of headwinds at the moment. Thank you.
Let me get in Rabinder Sachdev at this point as well. Rabinder, how should India be viewing this deal, this agreement that is being in between the two nations? What's the India viewpoint on this agreement and its nitty-gritties?
Thank you. A deep question, perhaps. One way to look at it, I would think, is that, you see, when Quad came around, okay, between the US, India, Japan, Australia, the idea was that it would be maybe a kind of a military bulwark against Chinese expansionism. The Quad is not that, right? The Quad is more of a strategic trade promotion, technology, standards, and all that. Now, over the past 1 year or so, a different Quad is emerging. I think there's some name they're calling it Quad or whatever, which is US, Japan, Philippines, and Australia. And that will be the military, partnerships which will combat it out. So from India's perspective, the strengthening of these military alliances, on the one hand, is good. It cuts short China's ambitions, but it also means that the US would look less at India in terms of military aspects with respect to Chinese expansionism. And therefore, in the American calculus, in some ways, India's, weightage or gravity would actually be a little bit diluted. Though, of course, India is a strong partner, will remain, and is there, the Indian market and multiple other things with respect to India, for which US-India partnership is a natural one and a high growth one. But of course, US realizes that India will not, undertake, let's say, arms in case of a conflict in Taiwan, right, in the South China Seas. Whereas that is America's core interest in one sense. So now what is emerging is a military alliance pact in this region, wherein Japan is going up to 2% of its defense spendings, Philippines is partnering up, Australia is already partnered up. And what America is doing in this region is that, like Roger was mentioning, they've taken up 4 or 5 military bases in Philippines in the last 1 year. They've signed up more, right? America is going at a decentralized, distributed kind of a strategy to have as many bases as possible in this region so that they can wage a nimble, agile war against China. They are, buffering up, jacking up their defenses in Guam. But other than that, like China has been expanding, let's say, artificial islands, etc. What the U.S. regime or the U.S. Theory is coming around is to have more distributed points in this region so that shorter, quicker combat teams, be it Marines, be it air, be it naval, can operate in a quick manner rather than, having one big central command somewhere only in Japan, in Okinawa or wherever, etc., and then, lumbering forth from there. So one is that is the military naval strategy of the US, to have more and more bases in this region to counter China in case of a war, God forbid. And also to kind of, I think essentially that's there. And with respect to India, again, I'll come back. So for India, definitely it's good that Chinese ambitions are being reined in and China is being given a clear signal that, you cannot be a bully or a non-regular player in this world ecosystem. It's a new world matrix which is emerging and is under construction. In this new world matrix, these partnerships are really game changers, I would say. As I think all our panelists are saying, that for Japan and to enter into a military partnership is something unthought of. For 70 years, the army is known as only the self-defense forces. It's only the last 2 years or so that they've done a about turn and they've gone now to saying that we will double up our expenses, we will now go out. We will have now an offensive wing. They're buying the Tomahawk missiles from the US and all those are offensive missiles. So far, Japan had never been buying any offensive weapons, so to say. So I think those are the two things that one can see as trends.
Okay. Also, Commodore Anil J. Singh, the tenets, of course, are very, very clear. It's clearly to counter China's South China Sea aggression. Both these nations agree that China needs to be countered, which is why, of course, they've signed this reciprocal agreement. The clear target, do you believe, is very clearly China, and China perhaps will be very concerned at this development?
Yes, I entirely agree with you that this is definitely a military arrangement, notwithstanding the economic aspect which they are talking about. It is basically to contain China because China, unfortunately, has been flexing its military muscle a bit too much in the region. And with their now intimidation of both Philippines and Taiwan, it affects Japan. Japan has clearly said a couple of months ago that any action on Taiwan by China will involve us because it affects their sea lanes of communication. It affects Japan's security profoundly, as it does the Philippines as well. So I think I don't know what the Chinese strategy is because to me it appears that China is spreading itself rather thin by opening up too many fronts. And if push comes to shove, perhaps all these like-minded navies getting together can bring a lot of pressure to bear on China and support the US in its effort to contain China as well as counter China in case of any standoff over Taiwan. From the Taiwanese perspective, it's a good development. They are looking to partners and like-minded partners and allies to beef up their security, to help beef up their security, to deter China from carrying out any kind of aggressive action against them. For Japan, it's a particularly significant move as the panelists have brought out. Firstly, Japan doesn't do these kind of things. It's signed a RAA now, it's a 2+2. Of course, it still needs to be ratified by the Japanese parliament. There will be a lot of political discussion on this because there are other pacifists in the Japanese parliament who will oppose it, but I think it will go through eventually. It's also, Philippines is the first recipient of a $415 million program called Defense Aid. Now, China has never exported defense equipment here. It's willing to give defense equipment gratis to countries it needs to engage with. So that's a significant step. From the US perspective, it's an extremely important step from a free and open Indo-Pacific perspective because the more navies that oppose China, the less opportunity China has to kind of blockade the South China Sea or assert its military muscle over there. And it helps the cause of the free and open Indo-Pacific that all like-minded maritime democracies are looking at. From a Chinese perspective, one of China's fundamental goals before it takes Taiwan, which is a core interest, and it is not going to compromise on that, whether it's a peaceful annexation or reunification or a military annexation, is that it has to make its first island chain absolutely invulnerable. It's got the great undersea wall, all kinds of things. It's got its A2, AD anti-access area denial capability, etc., etc. But the fact is that just making the first island chain impregnable does not serve the purpose. It has to make a substantive area beyond it impregnable so that nobody can reach the first island chain. And all these moves are going to make China very vulnerable from two perspectives. Firstly, countries, like-minded countries, attacking China from just outside the first island chain and not allowing the Chinese Navy to break through the first island chain and going into the open sea. As was brought out just now, one of the American admirals even said that it's going to be a hellscape for China if it tries to escape through the Persian Strait. So China is, I think, hemming itself into a corner. It's going to find it very difficult to get out of that, particularly if it continues with its maritime belligerence against Japan in the East China Sea, over the Senkaku Islands, with Philippines, with Vietnam, with Malaysia, with Brunei, with Indonesia. I mean, it just opened up too many fronts.
For more such videos, subscribe to the NewsX YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.